heard of named Detroit, and they left Detroit in the 1960s, in the late 1960s. And my dad lost his job at a steel plant that shut down. We started having home invasions in our neighborhood. And so my parents moved out with a little 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. I was the 4-year-old. And moved to Chicago in search of better opportunity. And that's where I grew up. And I moved out here 17 years ago for the same reason that my parents had left their home. The reason why I left is because I wanted to live in a place of opportunity. And what I like about Colorado is it doesn't matter where you're from here. And it doesn't matter who your family was. And it doesn't matter what school you went to. What matters in Colorado is whether you're willing to work hard, persevere, and build yourself a future. And I think that's why we're all here. Or that's why we came here, or our forebears came here, is to lead a better life. And I'm afraid we're losing that here in Colorado. We are losing that under this governor. And it's always hard to go after a couple other very articulate gubernatorial candidates, because they said, how do you figure out another way to criticize John Hickenlooper after what we've heard already? Fact of the matter is, he has followed the liberal agenda. Every item on that checklist he's checked off. Gun control, he's checked that off. Tax increases for teachers' unions, he's checked that off. Renewable energy mandates that drive up electric costs, he's checked that off. Soft on the death penalty, soft on crime, he's checked that off as well. I know I'm missing a bunch. Common Core, he supports that. He's an Obamacare cheerleader, and of course he's signed at least a couple vote fraud bills. So every item on that he's checked off, and we really need to turn the state around. I stood before you here about 4 years ago when I ran for Secretary of State, and a lot of folks said, well, you've not held elected office before, you shouldn't run for office. And I thought, well, I had a certain vision on what I wanted to do, and I had a set of certain principles. And I had a background. I've served as a federal prosecutor and Army veteran, served overseas as well with the Army. And I managed and built businesses, and I had a family with, at that time, one daughter. And there were things that I wanted to do. And so I talked about those things on the campaign trail. I talked about conservative issues. And I talked about photo ID and how we needed election integrity and how we needed to cut those fees and we needed to cut back on regulation. Common sense, but solid conservative principles. And I won that election. And I beat a Democrat incumbent. They told me he was popular, but we ran against him anyway, and we beat a Democrat incumbent. And I didn't beat that incumbent by a little, but I beat him by a lot, even with a third-party candidate there. And so we want our candidates, I think, we want our Republican candidates who can articulate a conservative vision in a popular, pragmatic, positive way. And I've done that. And we want them to be able to win an election, to actually put that into action. And I've done that as well. So I got in office, and I thought, well, this is what I promised to do. And I guess this was pretty radical. I said, this is what I'm going to do. So I went off and I started doing it. And I realized that there's a reason the status quo exists. The status quo exists because a lot of people benefit from it, and they built it. And I have done everything I can to kick over the status quo. And I've sort of enjoyed doing it. But some of the things that drive me nuts that I've had to work through is, I talked about just enforcing our laws, right? We are a nation of laws, not a nation of arbitrary power. And so one of the laws on the books was you had to be a U.S. citizen to be able to vote, right? Seems pretty straightforward. And so I said, well, we're going to go out and enforce our law. And that's exactly what I did. I tell you, these heating systems sort of scare me when they turn on. I think I'm in an earthquake. So anyway, that's what I did. And it's interesting. No one in the nation had ever spent any effort to try and make sure we didn't have non-citizens on our voter rolls. In other words, that we only had citizens. And I remember I got started and no one, all my colleagues in other states, no one wanted to pay attention to this issue because it was a hard issue. And we stepped up, and I had to threaten multiple times to sue the federal government to actually follow the law, to give us information. I had to put together about 10 states to join in a potential lawsuit before they finally gave in. And now other states are actually looking to Colorado on how to do this. And at the same time, we had an election coming up, and I still remember the Department of Justice called over and started asking us about what was going on. And, you know, I'd started at the DOJ, so I thought, well, no big deal, whatever, they're calling. Well, I found out later that that's basically what they do before suing states to try and force us to comply with their will. So the next time they called over, we thanked them for their interest and said they were welcome to visit us in front of an Article 3 federal judge if they needed to. But absent that, we weren't going to talk to them. And we pushed them back as well. But there's a real ethos, there's a real status quo that you got to fight. The other thing that I did when I got in office is, you know, when I say keeping my promises, I thought fees were a little bit too high. And frankly, I think money is better spent by the people who earn it rather than by the government that takes it. That's just my view on things. Unfortunately, a lot of people on the other side of the aisle don't believe in that. In fact, a lot of folks look at government as a cow to be milked. You know, how can I get something out of government? And that's not just entitlements we talk about. I mean, we see that with, you know, corporate cronyism and corporate welfare as well. Well, I cut back our fees. And I also cut back our regulations. I mean, we talk about, you know, going through regulations with a fine-tooth comb. Well, I've done that. And I've rewritten almost all of our regulations at the Secretary of State's office because I think that government should regulate less, not more. But it's not just sort of ordering things. What it requires is building a management team, building a culture. So in ways great and small, you have employees, government employees, we want them to wake up every morning and regulate less, not figure out ways to regulate more. And that takes work. Because all the candidates, no matter how smart we think we are, we're not going to be able to review every regulation. We just don't know all this stuff. But we got to have the people who can do it, and you build a culture. And that's what I've done at this office. So what you see coming out of my office are not only lower fees and reduced regulations and innovative services, but you see it not just now, not just in the past, but going forward and forward and forward. Because it's not just me who's doing it. I've got the people in place who regulate less every day. They don't regulate more. So we talk about Republicans, we want to be able to articulate values, and we want them to win an election, and then we want them to have the courage to stand up to the abuse that the left wing is going to throw at us. And then we want them to be able to do the things they said they do and be successful. Here's what I submit to you. I've done all that. All of us talk about what we're going to do, but I talk about also what I've done. And why do I talk about what I've done? I guess because where you stand depends on where you sit. And so I'm looking to run for governor. Well, I am running for governor. And I'm asking for your support. And what I'm trying to do is demonstrate that these aren't just pie-in-the-sky rhetorical flourishes. These are things that we can accomplish. You can transform government. You can make government serve you, not the other way around. It takes hard work. It takes creativity. It takes courage. And I've done that to make sure that this is a better place for us now and in the future here. At the end of the day, I talk about, you know, my parents coming from Detroit and all. There's a future we have ahead of us. And what my history tells me is the future we have depends on the choices we make today and the values we transmit to our children. When my parents came of age in Detroit, it was the richest city in the world. It was the place of American dreams. It was the Silicon Valley, the heart of America's manufacturing might. It was the place we won World War II on the home front. That was Detroit in the 1950s. And look at it today. It is a byword for government and societal dysfunction. So, what type of future are we going to have in Colorado? Are we going to go the way of a California? Are we going to go the way of a New York or a Detroit? Or are we going to go towards a future where our kids can grow up, and I have 2 kids, and I want them to be able to grow up in an education system that's the world's best. I don't want them to have a Common Core system. I want them to have the world's best education system. And when they come of age, I don't want them to be looking to a Utah or a Texas for jobs, or if they're in the oil industry to go to Wyoming or North Dakota. I want them to have opportunities here in Colorado, world-class opportunities, a world brimming with optimism and confidence and opportunity. That's what I want them to have. And I want us to be able to have the freedom to raise our families and live the types of lives we want. One day, I'm going to look at myself in the mirror, our kids are going to look at us. Now what are they going to say? This is what I want them to say. That this generation, that we stood fast in the face of adversity. We took our principles, we applied them, and we built a better future, and we too restored the American dream. Thank you very much.
Good job.